And it is brilliant to have back with me today Nick Buckley, MVE, the charity campaigner and political activist who actually previously did run to be the Mayor of Manchester under the Reform UK umbrella. He has done it again since, though, as an independent. And joining us for the first time on Outspoken, but I'm a big fan of this man, Russell Quirk, the property expert, political commentator and columnist. So, Nick, because you have this previous relationship with Reform UK, let me kick off with you. What do you make of this growing paranoia and growing fear within the far left? You saw it at the TUC conference there, but you also see it with Slippery Starmer himself, trying to turn Nigel Farage into public enemy one, and also brand anyone who supports what he has to say as quote-unquote far right.
The left and the elite in this country have been quite happy with the Tories, because the Tories are basically socialists anyway. Reform are offering something different. Reform are saying we're going to be different and we're not part of the uni party, we're not part of the elite, and we're going to bring change. That terrifies them because you cannot control that. They have no idea if Reform get to power what they're going to do. We all knew what the Tories are going to do, which is exactly the same as what Labour were going to do. So just that one fact terrifies them. And that's why the next 5 years, 3 years are all about demonization of Farage and Reform. And down the line, they will start going after the supporters of Reform UK as well.
Russell Quirk, you believe that Keir Starmer is actually the biggest threat to our democracy since World War II. What do you mean?
Yeah, I do, because he has now revealed himself rather more quickly than we thought as a tyrant and as an autocrat. I think he stole the election under false pretenses. I think he was rather Blairite, Dan, really, in that, he was all about wealth and growth and home ownership. Actually, you could argue that those policies are rather right-wing, rather conservative. And within minutes of landing in Downing Street, he ends up showing his colours as an extreme left-wing, ideologically driven autocrat. I mean, he is of the extreme left, and we're seeing that. And by the way, the people that actually might be putting comments now saying, well, he's not that bad. I mean, this guy's worse than Jeremy Corbyn. At least with Jeremy Corbyn, you knew what you were getting. This guy is a politician and a prime minister by stealth. And not only has he done things already that are not in the manifesto, so for instance, the early release of 40,000 dangerous prisoners, immigration amnesties, stealing 10 million pensioners' winter fuel allowance from them, all these things that were not in the manifesto. But I would go further. I think this man is so driven by a kind of sixth form ideology, which is of the far left. That's why he's so worried about reform, because he knows that by him lurching to the left and presumably staying there as long as he can stay in place, there's going to be a huge gap, a huge vacuum to fill, particularly if the Tories mess up the leadership contest, which I think they probably will.
Yes.
That vacuum is going to be filled by reform. So a man that labels his opponents as something of a bogeyman type nature. We've kind of seen that before in the late 1930s when Hitler did that to the Jews. Also seen back in the late 1930s, the Nazis starting to at first vilify, then censor, then imprison their political opponents. Now that's rather familiar over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Dan, isn't it?
Yes. I totally agree. And the thing is, people will say it's hyperbole. The mainstream media don't even want to cover it. But I'm sorry, we see evidence of this two-tier policing. Look, there are some of the victims of it on a daily basis at the moment. And it is completely disturbing. People who cause no injury to anyone being locked up for 9 years, while Muslim men who literally beat up 3 women at a petrol station, receive no jail time whatsoever. So that is going on. Nick Buckley, what about the personality of Nigel Farage? What do you think he has to do in order to become Prime Minister? And can he?
Oh, that's a hell of a question. I've no idea. Yeah, I'm sure he's got a better idea than me what he needs to do. I'm not a politician. I think if I was going to give him any advice, it's all about how does he connect to the average Brit in the UK? because the average person I speak to is sick of all politicians, is sick of all political parties. We've been lied to for at least, for generations, but definitely for 30 years. Keir Starmer is just the latest person in this long line. And the only way Keir Starmer is different is he's either not clever enough, which I doubt, or he doesn't care about the mask anymore now. He's ripped the mask off and he's saying to the people, I'm here, there's nothing you can do about it, and it's my way or the highway. Our last 5 politicians have been exactly the same. Our last 5 members of Prime Minister have been exactly the same, but they didn't have the cojones to say that to the British people. So I think Nigel Farage needs to connect with the average people because they want something different. They want to be patriotic. They don't want to be called far right. They just want a better life. And it doesn't take much to give us a better life.
Russell, are you a fan of Farage?
I am. I think Farage is our new Thatcher. You mentioned Thatcher previously. That might be the real reason that Keir Starmer's taken her portrait down. I don't think any of us buy into this bunkum that it's because her portrait is staring down at him. If that is true, it's because he's probably ashamed of what he's doing and knows that if he were to face Thatcher across the ballot box, the dispatch box these days, I mean, that would be a sight, wouldn't it? He'd be absolutely destroyed by Thatcher. And I think he fears Farage as the new Thatcher. And what I mean by that is not just the fact that they share very, very similar principles. And let's be clear, Dan, Farage is not this kind of, this extremist, this far right individual that, of course, the mainstream media would have us believe. If you look at everything that the Reform Party is saying, everything that Farage has said, everything that was in that contract with the public in the run-up to the July the 4th election, there's nothing in there that wouldn't have been in the Conservative manifesto of 1979. So reform, in my view, and I say this as a proud Thatcherite, reform, in my view, are conservative. Of course, the previous Conservative government was not very conservative, and that's what Keir Starmer is concerned about. But to kind of answer Nick's question or expand on Nick's answer a little, I think that the Reform Party are new. They don't have much in the way of ground support. I think they have some very, very talented people amongst them, particularly, Richard Tice, Ben Habib, we can go on and on. Obviously, that would expand. There'll be more defections. There were actually 2 defections from the Conservative Party on Southend City Council.
Yes, I've got them on later in the show.
Oh, are they? Oh, fantastic.
Yes, for an exclusive interview, so I can't wait to hear about why they
So there'll be a lot more of that. But I think they need ground support. What I saw where I live in Brentwood and Essex, which is a very conservative constituency, was that the Conservatives traditionally have lots and lots of people out there to knock on doors and canvass and leaflet. Reform didn't have that. So I think Nick's right about connecting with the public, but I think if the public want change, and I know we overuse this word, we always need change, don't we, based on the current regime. But I think if we really, really want to save Britain from being completely destroyed, frankly, as it may well be over the next 2 or 3 years, as we lurch back to the 1970s, I think people have got to get out to physically help reform on the doorsteps. We've got to get the message out there. We've got to get leaflets. Now, when I say we, I'm not suggesting for a second that I'm necessarily a dyed-in-the-wool Reform Party member or activist. But if we want there to be an antithesis to the Labour Party and its extreme left approach, but also a very, very insipid Conservative Party that are largely irrelevant now as far as the electorate are concerned, then people have got to get out there and help the Reform Party on the doorsteps.
Indeed. You mentioned some of those talented people. Richard Tice is one of them, and he has been campaigning hard on the issue of 2-tier policing, specifically involving the shocking case at Manchester Airport. Here's the latest on what he had to say about it.
The police have to get out body cam footage from their officers, CCTV footage, in order that the truth is told. And unbelievably, here we are, I think some 6 or 7 weeks on. Yeah. As far as I'm aware, those gentlemen you generously called them, who assaulted the police officers, they still not been charged. Yeah. Now, quite rightly, when you had those horrific riots recently, those who assaulted emergency workers and police officers were charged and brought to justice very promptly. Well, why haven't these 2 individuals been charged and brought to justice very promptly? I'll tell you why. It's because it's virtue signalling to an ethnic minority. That's why. It's a serious allegation I'm making, but I tell you what, this is absolute cast iron bottom proof of two-tier policing, two-tier justice.
Yes.
It's absolute disgrace.
But Sir Keir Starmer says that's not an issue.
This is proof that it is issue, and the fact that he's tetchy about it is also proof that it's for real. The police...
He's doing a great job on this, isn't he, Nick Buckley? Because it is completely true. How on earth can justice be rushed for a white working class person who happened to post something slightly offensive on Facebook or X and ends up locked up for 3 years? But when it comes to people who are literally beating up the police, according to what we see on that CCTV footage, goes at a snail's pace.
Some groups in our community, in our country, have more value than others. So the white working class have no value to Labour, have no value. They've stopped voting for the Labour Party over generations. Most of them don't even go out and vote now. So they have no value. The Muslim community, on the other hand, are still supporting Labour. Some of them are beginning to drift away. So Labour are doing whatever they can now to retain that Muslim bloc vote because they're important to Labour. So this interference, this political interference with the police is to secure that vote. I used to be based in police stations 20 years ago. I've trained police officers when I've worked for Manchester Council. I saw 20 years ago two-tier policing. It's been going on for decades and decades. All that's happened now since Black Lives Matter, and then since we've got mobile phones we've got cameras on our phones, is we get to see it every day now. Where 20 years ago, nobody saw it unless you worked with the police.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons, isn't it, Russell? You have the likes of Tony Blair wanting to shut down social media.
Well, yes, they want to censor Elon Musk, shut down social media, or rather the people on social media that they don't agree with. You hear from some, again, I call them far left commentators, that they think the internet should be regulated. They don't like opinions that don't accord with their own, and certainly don't like freedom of speech. And the fact is, the logic around that is that, in a free society, in a society where there is freedom of expression and free speech, it comes down to the power of an individual's argument. So you either win the argument on the argument by way of logic and persuasion and data, or you don't. Now, if you lose the argument, it probably means that you're wrong. If you win the argument, it probably means that you're right. What the left are fantastic at doing is shutting down political opponents that they disagree with, because despite the fact that political opponents, like those assembled on this show now, they can't argue successfully. So their only resolution is to shut people down, even as far as the likes of, yes, Elon Musk and others that are, powerful voices. And again, I come back to the point. This is tyranny. This is something at the late 1930s. And we should be very
It's woke tyranny, but it is tyranny.
Yeah,
it is.
There's the fact of the matter is what the Labour, what left-leaners, whether it's the Green Party, because they're left-wing, extreme actually in some respects, the Lib Dems and Labour, what they're concerned about with regard to the example of the Manchester airport thugs, the 4 of them that haven't yet been charged 7 weeks later, they're simply concerned about backlash and optics and perception. In city centres where there's huge ethnic minority populations, they simply don't want to upset them. And again, where have we heard that before? Where is that familiar from in our fairly recent history in Britain? I'll tell you where it's familiar from, and that's the Rochdale grooming gangs. We have it on record from police officers at the time. They didn't want to pursue those prosecutions. This is Pakistani Muslims raping 10, 12, 13-year-old white British girls. They didn't want to pursue it because they didn't want to ignite bad feeling within those communities. Well, that, I think, is the very opposite of a fair and balanced approach to policing and the criminal justice system. And by the way, who is involved in the Department of Prosecutions, the DPS, way back then? Keir Starmer.
And he doesn't like to talk about that aspect of his record, does he? Just like he doesn't like to talk about the fact that he was the bloke who didn't charge Jimmy Savile. But breaking right now, the BBC breached its own editorial guidelines more than 1,500 times during the height of the Israel-Hamas war, a damning report has discovered. This has been revealed by the Sunday Telegraph, which says the corporation has shown a deeply worrying pattern of bias against Israel. The authors of the report analysed 4 months of the BBC's output across TV, radio, online news, podcasts and social media. It was led by the British lawyer Trevor Anderson, who also found that Israel was associated with genocide more than 14 times than Hamas. Now, on Saturday, significantly, Danny Cohen, who is a former top BBC executive, warned that there is now a, quote, institutional crisis at the broadcaster and called for an independent inquiry into its coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. Now, I fully support that. But Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform UK, has concluded, also quite rightly, that the completely corrupted state regulator, the Off-Communists, are not fit for purpose, given they ignore the Beebs bias, even though it has been completely exposed by this report, while doing all they can to target the so-called right broadcast in this country, like focusing their attention on driving me off GB News. Watch what he had to say.
It is. Well, my view is that Ofcom, frankly, is not fit for purpose, and its treatment of other channels, such as GB News, compared to the way that it sort of that it mollycoddles the BBC, and you highlighted it there. The unfairness of the system, as Lucy said, that the BBC can basically self-regulate itself on behalf of Ofcom, and so surprise, surprise, it behaves as it does. We all knew that it was clearly biased in its reporting of the horrific war in the Middle East, and yeah, I think that Ofcom's got some serious questions to answer. At the very least, Ofcom should directly respond to complaints about the BBC. And the way they treat GB News and people like
I'm
Talk
going to be
TV
devil's advocate on this as a journalist rather than a politician. Ofcom has expressed concerns that people like you and people like Nigel might come on a channel and start campaigning.
But they didn't express any concerns about David Lammy, for example, a Labour MP, on LBC. So
no longer there, though.
If you're
now
going to be
in office.
Yeah, but if you're going to be a regulator, you've got to deal with a fair and just and equal hand, and they patently haven't done that.
What's your view?
And Russell Quirk, there is absolutely no outrage whatsoever about this shocking display of bias from the BBC, and the off-communists simply do not give a damn, because they are only there seemingly to drive anyone who's even slightly on the right off the mainstream media.
Yeah, no, in my opinion, Ofcom should be disbanded. I mean, Ofcom do serve. Richard Tice is absolutely right. They're not fit for purpose because they don't really suit a purpose. They don't solve anything. They don't serve a purpose. The fact that they are there to effectively filter content to the masses rather insults the intelligence of the masses, doesn't it? Because what they're effectively in place to do is to say, you're too stupid as a member of the public to understand that you're being campaigned to by Richard Tice or Nigel Farage or David Lammy, for instance. So therefore, we have to be in place to tell you what the balance is. We're not idiots. We don't need to have Ofcom to do that. Now, with the BBC, of course, the fact that we're not seeing huge outrage as a consequence of this report today. 1,500 instances of bias, which, by the way, is 5 instances of bias a day. 5 a day. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. I mean, if this was GB News or Talk, the fines that would be levied as a consequence of those indiscretions would be absolutely
They would be off air. I mean, they would just be off air. And I often say, Nick, actually, if the BBC was a private company, come on, it would have ceased to exist decades ago. I mean, covered up the biggest paedophile in the history of the UK, had a paedophile ring operating within it for decades. An interview which they illicitly obtained quite possibly caused the death of the late Princess Diana. I mean, come on, they're disgraceful, Nick Buckley, aren't they?
The BBC and Ofcom do exactly what they're paid to do, which is to benefit the government. Hence why they won't change. Hence why they'll carry on doing what they're doing unless someone like Nigel Farage and Reform take power, because they're part of the establishment, they're part of the status quo. And the reason why we've not had much outrage on this report is as simple as this. We all know it. This isn't a surprise. This isn't news. We've known it for at least a decade that the BBC is a propaganda arm of the government, of the elite, of the far left. We see it every day. We've got ears, we've got eyes. And what we need to remember is a quote from Stalin. When Stalin said, "We don't let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas?" And that's what the BBC and Ofcom is all about.
Oh, yes. But they're actually moving to a much more chilling territory now with James O'Brien, the red-cheeked sociopath at LBC, which I now call the Labour Broadcasting Company, and Tony Blair, the psychotic former leader of this country who used misinformation to push us into an illegal war in Iraq, both now in some way calling for either full censorship and regulation of the internet and social media, or actually, let's just shut down X altogether. Watch this.
The question of jurisdiction as well. You know, the server will be in one country, the person writing the message will be in another country. We've arguably seen this a little bit with the riots recently. But do you foresee a point in the not too distant future where other countries are going to have to follow Brazil's lead and take actual action against platform owners for the dissemination of disinformation?
Well, I'd certainly see a position where the world's going to have to come together and agree some rules around social media platforms. And I think that's, you know, quite what the answer is and what the right system of regulation is, I'm not sure, but I am sure there should be, and there's got to be, because it's not just, you know, how people can provoke, you know, hostility and hatred, but I think, and I don't know what the answer to this is, you know, and I'm just saying that. I don't
we can't carry on as we are.
But we can't carry on as we are, and I think the impact on young people particularly, when they got access to mobile phones very young, and they're reading a whole lot of stuff and receiving a whole lot of stuff that I think is really messing with their minds in a big way. And as I say, I'm not sure what the answer to it is, but I'm sure we need to find.
I mean, Russell Quirk, you speak of tyranny. Come on. And for those two to be talking about misinformation, because we know about Blair's misinformation, but what about James O'Brien's misinformation? Platforming. Carl Beach, who was the biggest fantasist in British history, who accused all of these completely innocent people of paedophilia when he was the paedophile.
Yeah, two individuals that have been responsible for more misinformation and disinformation than just about any other two that I can think of, calling for regulation. But they don't mean regulation. And actually, like you, Dan, I think, and you, Nick, when I hear words from people like that that are of rules and regulations, it does send a shiver down my spine, because they don't really mean regulation or rules. What they mean is control. And what they really mean by control is that we should be doing, saying, and thinking what they believe is best for us. And of course, when there's dissenters, particularly now we've got social media, which is pretty inconvenient, really, for people like Keir Starmer and James O'Brien and Tony Blair, because people have a voice. So, of course, they will want it shut down. I mean, that's why you don't have Twitter in China or Facebook in Korea. I mean, you see a pattern emerging here.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And actually, Nick, just before I get you to respond, I have to play you my favourite new comedian, Andrew Lawrence, who, as James O'Brien, was able to sum up the madness of the situation just perfectly today.
All these people complaining on social media, these far-right Nazi fascists on Elon Musk's X platform, complaining about the state of things, whinging on about two-tier this, two-tier that. These people are an utter disgrace to the nation. Isn't it time we shut down the internet? Or at least just stop people from expressing opinions that I don't like? It's out of control, isn't it? All the misinformation on social media, people spreading facts that conflict with my worldview. This can't go on. People say, oh, we don't have freedom of speech in this country. Well, we do, but if you exercise it, you shouldn't complain if you then have to do a bit of prison time. We can't have people who aren't part of the left-wing liberal establishment just going around saying things in public whenever they like, regardless of the consequences. That's not how things work, is it? And look, you may disagree with me on that, but ultimately, that's only a demonstration of your own ignorance and racism. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of telling stupid people how right I am about everything. But it pays well, so let's open the phone lines. And all these...
Nick, Nick Buckley, this is how they think.
It is. I mean, LBC, well, we all know the internet's not perfect. Social media is not perfect. X is not perfect. You know, we know there's lies out there. We know people use it to promote their own agenda or to commit crime or to incite violence. We all know that to be true. What we need to understand is no matter what we do to control that, we'll end up in a worse place. Because the people you think or you hire to control the internet will always be the last people we should give that power to. So we'll end up in the worst place. That doesn't mean where we are now is perfect, because it's not. But I would rather have this open, free flow of information where we've got to be a bit more clever and we've got to work out what are the lies and let's take some personal responsibility on what we believe and what we don't believe. I'd rather be in that position than having someone being paid to tell me what's true and what isn't true. And it's worse than that, them being paid to make sure I never see what they don't want me to see, because in that grouping will be all the things I should have seen.
Very well put. Very well put. Now, look, do stand by Russell Quirk and Nick Buckley, because in just 1 minute, I'm going to be showing you this very emotional new video from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, who has some big new information to share with the world. Also coming up, an exclusive interview, as I mentioned to Russell earlier, with the 2 Reform UK defectors who have joined Farage's party from the Conservatives. First, though, digestive issues are caused by a potential toxin that's in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for the longest time. And this potential toxin causes digestive issues, according to Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist. This is affecting millions of people nationwide. Warning signs include weight gain and fatigue and digestive discomfort, plus stiff joints, even skin problems, actually. Well, Dr. Gundry explains these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. I can assure you that the damage is probably caused by these health foods and is far from normal. The good news is you can easily help fix the problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can find this yourself if you visit right now gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. Now, you can see the QR code there on the screen, so you can just use that, enter the website, but I've also put the link in our show notes on YouTube and Rumble. Because after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public. I've watched it. It's free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. So go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken and click on the link in the description below. But now back to the show. And breaking right now, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has announced that she has finished her chemotherapy treatment, but she is not out of the woods, in a highly personal and emotional video featuring Prince William, her parents, and her beautiful children, released just before we came on here today. Watch. This is a video that would have been very difficult for Catherine to make. You know how much criticism she's had over the past few months. She has decided not to share the specifics of what form of cancer she is being treated for. But aside from that, it's a deeply personal insight into her world. And you know, I have been reporting for months that Catherine's number one priority is her family, is being a mother, and is making sure that her children, especially the future king, are prepared to cope with what is a very destabilizing thing. But despite there being a lot of speculation, she has confirmed that she will return to royal duties. But as I have reported here recently with Robert Jobson, this is going to be a very slow process, because Catherine has made it abundantly clear in what I'm about to show you that her number one focus, and I agree with this, by the way, her number one focus is making sure she stays cancer-free. A royal video for the history books. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, announcing that she has finished her chemotherapy treatment in her own way. And it is interesting, isn't it, when you contrast her approach to her family and revealing deeply personal information compared to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who have been so keen to throw their own family under the bus over the past few years. Let me bring in my superstar panel, Nick Buckley and Russell Quirk. Russell, wow, great news to see Catherine back, and she's doing things in her own way.
She is genuinely, what a woman, what a rock, actually, given what she's been through. And I know the term national treasure is very overused, but I think that term absolutely applies to Kate. Incredible to see that she's on the road to recovery, of course. I think it actually does renew our faith a little bit in the royals. Obviously, the royals have had somewhat of a patchy time over recent years, but when you see that video, which actually I think, despite what all the cynics will say, is that looks like a very genuine pastiche of their family enjoying themselves. It looked to me to be very authentic. So I do think it should give us some faith that let's hope the next step of the royal family won't be as blighted as perhaps the last 5 or more years have been. I do have to ask the question, though, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Has Meghan Markle and Harry extended a statement to support Catherine in the last few minutes and hours and to show their support? It should be, one would imagine, the first thing that Meghan and Harry would do. Yes. Haven't seen that video today, wouldn't it be?
And indeed, it should be. And they didn't do that, actually, after this video. They did do it after she announced that she had cancer. But what I think is so despicable is that Harry was actually in the same room as his elder brother, Nick Buckley, just last week at the funeral for Lord Fellows, their uncle, the husband of Princess Diana's sister. And he didn't even speak to William. He didn't go up to William and say, look, I know I've said terrible things about you, but how's Catherine doing? I hope she's okay. And I think when you see a video like that and you've been so horrible to these people, I mean, think of all of the things Harry said in Spare about William and about Catherine too, actually, and the things that Meghan has said about Catherine. Oh, how can you watch a video like that and think that what you did was right? I mean, they should be apologising, in my opinion, as in Harry and Meghan should be apologising to William and Catherine.
I don't discuss Prince Harry. Family matters, families fall out, people say things they may regret or not regret. But it's fantastic news that she's finished chemo. It's fantastic news when any family get over such a serious problem like that. So I'm extremely happy about that. I'm also extremely happy that that video looks fantastic. We need a royal family in this country because what we need to understand, if we don't have a royal family, we don't have a royal and monarch head of state, that means we're going to have an elected head of state. And that means someone like Tony Blair, David Cameron. It'll be a fail. It will
Gary
be
Lineker, David Beckham. Don't even suggest it.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we'll end up. And we'll end up with an elected head of state. And even though the monarchy, royal family are not perfect, and in a time where we celebrate democracy, they're not elected, I get all that. But the alternative for me is a lot worse. So fantastic that she's getting better.
Yeah, indeed. We need that family to be strong. I couldn't agree with you more. A lot hinges on them when it comes to the monarchy, because as Russell pointed out, it hasn't been smooth sailing the past 5 years. But what a fabulous superstar panel today. So grateful to have you back, Nick Buckley and Russell Quirk. What a debut. I hope you will return soon. Thank you both so much.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers. I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.